Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Before I introduce you to our guest, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. The small are always dependent on the great. They are small precisely because they think they are independent. The great thinker is one who can hear what is greatest in the work of other greats and who can transform it in an original manner. Martin Heidegger. Today I have the one and only Tony Capullo, dear friend of the Culture Matters podcast. And apparently today we're doing a switcheroo on you. I'm being interviewed.
You are the guest today.
I'm the guest.
You're the guest.
I'm so programmed.
I know you're going to have to answer the questions today, and I'm going to be sitting in your chair, so to speak. So, and I thought this is such a great idea because, you know, your listeners and your fans always hear you asking great questions, right? And I'm sure there's people out there that want to know more about Jay. I want to know more about Jay. So with that, I'm going to jump right in because I have some questions, and we'll start from there. So my first question is, first of all, I'd like to know, why culture? Like, what point did you say, this is what I can impact company's culture? Why culture?
Every day from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock for a period of time, I held a meeting in a business that I had helped start. And in this meeting, we talked about the values of the company. Now, we didn't have values of the company prior to a book. When I get down, I get depressed, I go to Barnes & Noble, something I've done for years. And many years back, before that first meeting, in the midst of the pain of that business, I went to Barnes & Noble, stressed out, anxious, not living actually in a home. I was living in that business at the time. And to the right of my periphery, as I walked in, I saw this blue and white color that stuck out to me. Like when you see a book, it just catches your eye. And I walked up to it and I opened it up, and I opened up the left, on the left side of the first, what do you call it? The beginning of the book, where you open it up and it shows you a little synopsis of what it's about.
The inside liner.
Yeah, it was a book that said uncontainable, the values of this company called The Container Store. And it said their success was attributable to their 7 fundamental values. And it just blew me away. And I read the book voraciously, and I realized we don't have values. That's where it started. I wrote down all our values. I brought them to my partner at the time. I was so excited about the whole idea. You know, he urged me, well, you're the one that should hold the meeting. He supported me in that. He said he had only good things to say about his opinion of who I was. And that was a recurring relationship at the time. Who I was, who I could be if I got my act together, and how well I run a team meeting. So I did it. I held that first team meeting, and I shared all the values of the company to the people that showed up to that meeting. And a gentleman in the back, he was like 20. We were all kids. He raised his hand and he goes, excuse me, this is stupid. To the effect of, why are we here? Why are we having this conversation? What's the relevancy? And my immediate response, without thinking it through, was, I agree. I hear you. Like, that makes sense. There was no resentment in my heart. It was like, what else do you think? And he shared, and I listened. And then I asked him, I told him, I read this book. I think this will help. I think if we have conversations together, we can grow together. And I retold the vision. And then I asked him for permission to share the rest of the values and to have this meeting. And he gave me that permission. And the rest was history. For a period of time, we met every day or just about every day during lunch. And we started off those meetings with kind of like a roll call, like, hey, this person, what's this value? And this person, what's that? I'll keep their names omitted in case they don't want to be called. But I remember them. They were, I'm connected with some of them to this day. What's this value? What's this value? What's that value? And each person would do the roll call. And then we'd go into a meeting where we talk about some kind of topic. It was in that original pain and suffering and reaction to it. And the success of that culture, like people would drive 30 minutes out of the way to come to our place of business. It was just this energy. And I thought, there's something here. That's my first answer. I've got multiple answers because it gets deeper than that about me and where I come from and, where do I come from and what is culture and where's my culture, right? Because you have business, you have family, you have individuality. But that was the initial conscious idea of like, values matter. What are our values? I'm presenting the values to our people. I'm getting feedback that, we're not bought into this, but but then I get permission. And within a few weeks, that person that wasn't into it, that first meeting, they were like the biggest fan. The energy just went to the next level. Everyone was on the same page, or at least more so than we were before. And I had an opportunity to step into a part of myself that I never fully realized was a part of who I am, which was representing values. Teaching.
By the way, you're such a fascinating person. This may be a two-parter. We may have to do two parts of this, to be honest with you.
I'm in.
Okay, just so everybody gets.
Well, I omitted about 47 more minutes of that answer out of respect to you.
Wow.
I get excited.
No, because I have a lot of questions. So, okay, so I'm going to go a little bit backwards because you mentioned it. Okay, where are you born?
Newark, New Jersey.
You're born there. Okay, you're okay.
That's what I was told.
Tell the listeners 3 things about Jay Doran that they don't know. I know one of them that I think of. You were a bodybuilder.
And they may not know that.
They may not know that. I know that because I've seen the pictures. It was absolutely the picture I saw were absolutely. I mean, you look like somebody chiseled you out of a block of marble.
Well, thank you very much.
You look like you're doing a Rambo movie. I mean, you really did. I mean,
I'll try not to feel insulted today based on how.
No. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I could never look like that. So tell the listeners 3 things about you that they don't know or you don't think they know.
I went to San Diego when about 11-ish, 12 or so, and gained 20 pounds that summer.
You were 11?
Vacation.
You were 11 or 12?
I had to be 11 or 12, and I went to visit a cousin who I admired and still do.
And to put this in perspective, you are how old now? You just turned
32.
Okay, so it's
20. Yeah, this will make it like.
Yeah, I just want to give them some scale.
Tone, right?
Yeah.
20 years ago.
You gained 20 pounds.
In about 10 days, visiting a cousin that I admired, who had and still to this day has a 6-pack. He's in his 50s, is a trainer, owned a gym. Michael, who I admired at the time, and in that span of time, I remember leaving that trip, having a good time, but leaving that trip, hating myself, hating and grabbing my stomach, and thinking like, well, what am I doing? What am I? That started my journey for the aesthetic. At the time, it was, Mom, can we go and get me some weights? We went to Modell's, and we didn't have much. I was able to get 1 5-pound dumbbell. This was when I returned from this trip.
Right.
All the value of that trip became negated because I went into this vortex of shame and embarrassment and self-loathing at 12, that I wasn't good enough. It was just all the other issues that I had like, centered or lasered themselves at this one imperfection of my being. And my mom, who's always been, I have 2 moms, but Barbara brought me to Modell's because she's trying to be helpful, as she's always been. to get me a solution to this, right? So I get 1 5-pound dumbbell, 1 10-pound dumbbell, one of each, essentially. I just remember this because we couldn't get 2. I had to get 1. And that started the journey for the exercise that you later see the fruit of in my mid-20s when I became, ended up being a body. I started at 12. And one thing the audience may not know about me outside of that started at 12 and why would be, well, by the time I hit the 8th grade, I had one giant right arm and one half the size left arm.
No,
Because I was just really
yeah.
using that one dumbbell and wasn't really switching. And I looked like Popeye for like a little kid, and kids admired me for various reasons. But one was that I had this strong right arm, and I didn't play sports or anything of that nature. And that's just one thing that the audience, another thing that they may not know is that I didn't graduate 8th grade. Mr. Mead, the principal, in his last year, like before he retired, I don't know what he did. I've got to track him down, or hopefully he's still with us. But my attendance wasn't good enough, and I was able to move on anyway. There was a handful of teachers, that whole experience, that middle school saved my life in a sense, because these people, they saw something in me. And so whether it was whatever, they made sure I got to the freshman year, or else I would have not made it through 8th grade for attendance. I rebelled in 7th grade. Everything went downhill in 7th grade as far as my academics and my investment into schooling. I decided around that time that I was going to be an entrepreneur and I wasn't going to participate in school. And I'm not making an argument that that's something other people should do, but that's just what occurred. And so people may not know that I never graduated the 8th grade, but I did move on to the freshman. And they may also not know that I didn't graduate. I dropped out my first high school and senior year.
Really? I did not know that.
And then we moved. This was and I didn't realize until later that we suffered economically. My mother adopted me when she was in her 50s. And so by then she had been, past her retirement age, really, and was on tough times because the recession, didn't have much of a career. So we had to move to really save money, to downsize dramatically. And it was at that time that I decided to enroll in another school to get kind of a lease on life, a new lease on life. And so I was asked to leave that school inevitably. So there's been I didn't pursue any higher learning, or ultimately I didn't start reading until about 18 years old, maybe close to 19. They may not know that about me either. Those are two things. A third would be what I actually do. I would argue that as an advisor to CEOs, I'm that person that people rely upon to have conversations they may not be able to have with others in the context of their business or their life, because of the isolation that comes with being responsible for a company, everything falling on someone, that people feel safe to have those conversations with, but also to help those in positions of power think through problems and strategize. And that's what I've become in the world, is that consigliere, as they call it, or in French, the personne de confiance. And how the heck did I become that? I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out to this day, but I think it's the mosaic of my life and the stitching of my life, and this voracious capacity and ambition to educate myself on the things that I didn't take advantage of when I was in my adolescence, which should be, the love of the world and understanding the world. And of course, that desire to be successful and to create business and so on and so forth. So those are 3 things that I'd say the audience is unlikely to know. One is, the struggles that I had young with my weight, health, how I perceive myself, that I was not, I had a difficult time starting in 7th grade and beyond, being a part of the public school system And that what exactly do I do, and what do we do as a firm to this day, as a management consulting firm?
You are a management consultant, you're a very successful one. And
Yeah, I should say, they also may not know that for my age, I'm in the 1%. Like, I don't, and I'm not going to go beyond that because it's uncouth. I think that to be a professional, there's certain things you don't go into. But I think I have to be at least comfortable because I have succeeded at something at this point but I'm not going to go past that, but I'm successful, according to statistics, right? Like, I should be dead or in prison, based on the idea of the single parent household and, not following the formal route. And I'm not against the formal. I'm pro the formal route. I'm pro a lot of things. But that's another thing. Like, we are successful. Meaning we can pay the bills, we can eat, we've got, I feel successful.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask you this question, because I would be remiss not to ask it. You just said we. And I happen to know who the other part of we is, right? So I want to ask you about Jenna Silverman. And I want to ask you, what does she mean to Jay Doran's life? What does she mean to the company? And how has she shaped the person we see, the person we listen to, is partially shaped by your relationship with her. And she's a wonderful person. I know her. So, but I'd be remiss to leave her out of this. So I'm going to, she's not here to answer these, but I want to ask you about her.
Hopefully by the time this is released, she's Duran, Jenna Duran.
Okay. I will throw the rice, by the way. It won't be boiled, but
I appreciate that. That's endearing. First, Jenna Silverman is my coach. I'd have to lie to myself to give any other. She's my confidant. Jenna, brilliant. And we are Culture Matters in the form that it is today. Had it not been for us meeting and our inseparableness after, I think I could, be in the news for some type of cult. That's the genetic / environmental milieu of what my fate, or my fate without destiny, without intervention.
And Jenna, how did you meet Jenna?
We met at a party. It was someone that had hired me to help them in their business years and years ago, thought that I should meet this person that they knew. And we met at a party, and immediately there was friction, meaning we disagreed on something deeply, and I wasn't emotionally aware enough nor mature enough to handle it. And then luckily for me, she decided to engage back into the conversation, and the rest was history. We were disagreeing over something that she was right about in hindsight.
What was it? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was this flyer for an event that it was just like awfully made. And I took it, to heart, because I'm insecure and certain about things often that it'll be more helpful to be less certain about. And so and she's like, went back to the other person and was like, this guy's terrible. And they said, just go back, talk to him. And then so she did. And then we just talked the rest of the night.
And
a couple days later, this was,
had
to be 2018. 18.
Recently. Well, that's pretty recent.
I mean, yeah. I'm much more of the intuitive. She's more of the rational. So she'll know the date and what was, everything. I'm like, oh, was that this year or that year. I'm very intuitive, less rational, I would argue. And so she'd know that better, but it was around that time. And one further thing to that, I was about to give a talk, like a training / lecture oration in front of 150 or so real estate agents and mortgage and title that week. And we had just connected. And in that speech, when I learned something new, I tend to share it, and things kind of just connect. And I ended up bringing her up in the speech because she at the time had been the COO of a up and coming liquor brand that frankly she was an integral operational component of. And I was very impressed by her, and I brought her up in the talk because she was a local and I was impressed by her. And she had taught me something about one of our founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton. And I used it as a story to make a point. And this was on Facebook Live, and we were connected through people, and it ended up coming back to her. Like, that guy, Jay Doran, is talking about you. And then that's when we reconnected more deeply. And then long story longer, we found out that week or something, I was going home and I get out of my car. I parked in the street at that time. I had a parking spot, but I parked on the street, and then I saw her, and she's like, "Why are you near my house?" I was like, "No, I live here." We were neighbors for like 6
That's really.
months.
That's
Yeah, we
great.
were
Why
neighbors
are
the
you
whole
by my
time. We never
house?
knew each other. Yeah, and she always likes to say, had we not been neighbors, we wouldn't be together, because she wasn't able to, follow up me when I was trying to run from the early intimate stages of our relationship. So a lot of it was fated in this. I mean, could be argued. We ended up being, it was like my street, and then the street over, it's like not adjacent or like a cross street, but like right next to each other in the whole city of Philadelphia. So more succinctly, Jenna Silverman is the COO of Culture Matters. She is the yin to my yang, the order. I'm a chaos. She has a healthy amount of chaos, though. And so much so that together we've been able to succeed together where I failed alone, I would argue.
Is it difficult to be in a relationship with someone you work with?
For me, I don't think it is. So I think I've always pulled my person close. The question was, were they my person ultimately in the long game, based on all of my peculiarities, picadillos, imperfections, issues, emotional right? So and vice versa. Like, do they have the depth that me personally I need to keep it interesting? So for me, it's what I have always been. I think that to pull the person I'm with, like, where are we going together? So that's natural. What is hard would be based on the data, I'm a difficult person to live with and to be with. So that's how I would argue that. But as far as like our relationship, she is so focused and a hard worker, like insanely hard working, more than me in different capacities. So that's easy. But I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't give myself I haven't come across any relationships that are easy. I
would agree with that.
Yeah, I come across people who are in relationships, and it seems to me as though we all share varying degrees the hardships of life and the complexity that comes with going along life with another person and saying, I'm going to be with you and not, and cut off all the other kinds of her. So I hope that is some type of answer. As far as working together, that's easy because we really bonded around my curiosities of business and culture and all these other disciplines. She has a background in psychology and English, and it was like a kind of like a perfect glove. Like, she edited the book 30 Days of Thought. It was really her idea, 30 Days of Thought. I believe as a, oh yeah, I remember this. She said, Jay, you got to write. You're nuts. Like, it'll help you. You'll go insane if you don't write. And so I wrote that book quickly, the basis of it.
Let's talk about the book for a second, can we?
30 Days of Thought. Yeah, it was like.
So, and you're writing a second one.
Yeah, there's like, I want to say there's more, but right now there's one that has to get out that starts phase 1 of development, which is phase 1 and 2 is like I conceptualize it, and then phase 1 is the outline. So it's like pre-phase, conceptualization, then outline, and then you start getting into the meat of the chapters. I'm at phase 1, like the outline, because I did the pre-conceptualization. That's the book I'm going to focus on to come out next. And so that starts the writing of phase 2, which is like the writing of it after the outline, which is after the conceptualization. That starts in October of 2023.
Do you write in sequence?
I
don't. That's why.
Yeah, no, it's, you know what? It's hard for me to say.
I get a thought and I'm like, I want to talk about this. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's a concept. Do you?
I don't think I do. So I want to add to this. I don't consider myself a writer by any means,
Well, you're
although
an
I've
author.
written. So I'm an author, and there's really a program. There's a process available to the marketplace called 30 Days of Thought. It's much less a nonfiction book than a process for the reader to write their own, to think their own thoughts, write their own thoughts in the book, and a call to action to film their own thoughts. It's much less a nonfiction book like beginning, middle, end based on a premise, based on a thesis, so on and so forth, which is what the next book, my goal is to be. So when you ask what type of writer I am, I'm still exploring that. And if we looked at, I'm still exploring what type I am. But if we look at the literature that's been published, like 30 Days of Thought, it's an agglomeration or a combination of essays, of like short, excerpts, rather, thoughts, that there is a narrative within it, poorly explained, I'll add, but the premise of it is really more for the reader to do what I said earlier: write their thoughts down, have their own thoughts, or rather in the other order, have their own thoughts, write their thoughts down, be challenged to do that, and then film videos for social media to post those thoughts. So it's much less a book traditionally than a process or an experience of the reader going through a mixture of thought that I had written down. 30 Days of Thought was my process, at the behest of my partner, who's saying, you really have, I've never met someone with this level of understanding of culture. It's like even psychology, someone not trained in business. If you write this down, this is going to help you, and it'll help other people. So 30 Days of Thought is less a book, in my view, than a process. Although people have read it as a book and not done the process, which they interpret it the way they interpret it. The next book will be like what is essentially cultural training, right? Culture doesn't work. We'll talk about that, but we don't have to talk about that.
I don't want to run out of time, so I want to ask you these rapid fire questions.
I'm in.
Ready? What guest has intrigued you the most? And don't say me, because it's not me. But
Yeah,
I mean, ours are more like coffee.
No, the first person that pops to my mind is Phil Mancuso.
Okay.
Now, the bias with that is I just got off the podcast with him.
Okay.
Meaning that was like an hour ago.
It's fresh.
Intrigue is not the right. I love talking to Phil, but I love talking to Tyler. I love talking to John. I love talking to Tony. I love talking to Graham. I love talking to Jeremy. I love talking to Andrew. I love talking to Brian and Eddie and Christine and Jerry and Troy. And
But if you had to pick,
there's so
one,
many left out on that.
I know,
Barry.
I know,
like,
it's a tough question. But if you
it's
had to-
so.
by the way, have you ever? And I've never asked you this, and it just popped into my head. Has Brad Lee been on your podcast?
Yeah, I think he's episode either 49 or 51.
Okay.
We're gonna
So-
get him again this year. When we go out there, I say I want, but we have this is the thing. If we're working, I do the best I can to focus on to make it about the other person, not about me. And juggling that is hard, right? But one thing I've recently done is do shows with those that we've been able to serve, like real early in the morning before the workday when we're getting stuff done. And it's been one of the most fun things to do. So my belief is that Brad is going to be on a lot more in the next few years. But yeah, he's been on once, but not enough for sure.
Okay. Next question. Who, someone you know, actually know the person, has had the biggest impact on your career? I know that's real tough. I'm asking you for one, but if you had to pick one, who would it be? So you have to know the person. And the third question is what person, whether you know them or don't know them, right? Everybody listens to Ed Milet, Grant Cardone, and people don't know Brad, you and I don't, but that you don't know has impacted you. So who do you know that's impacted your career, and who a person that you
I
that
think
you
about
made-
this often. I'm gonna answer it two ways. First is I'm doing a challenge right now that when the audience listens to this, I may have already succeeded or failed at it, but it's 100 podcasts in 100 days, 100 letters written in 100 days.
By the way, I have your letter. Thank you. I have to ask you about the diagram, which I don't understand, but
We're going to talk about that together.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
100 introductions made in 100 days, 100 calls made in 100 days, 100 push-ups a day for 100 days, and 100 days of threads. Each one of those challenge pieces within that challenge has someone that inspired me. So Tony Capullo is the inspiration behind 100 introductions. That's something you've inspired, advised, coached me to, and role modeled in how you live. 100 introductions. Tyler Wagner made 25,000 sales calls in 5 years. He's my inspiration for 100 calls. 100 push-ups, Mike McCann, been on the podcast a few times. The real estate man in Philly. He did like hundreds of push-ups every day for all of COVID. Amazing. He's like in his 60s. He's just like an amazing man. Brad Lee dropped bombs. Like podcasting, every time I'm with him and I see him in action and I see the output, and he's a visionary. So he was way ahead of a lot of people with the podcast. That inspired me to do more podcasts. The letters. Linda Doran, my biological mother, I got a box of letters and information from Barbara a couple of years ago that I finally opened up. And it was letters to me from Linda. And I thought, I need to start writing people letters. Brian Hess, also the thank you notes that the Pavement Group has done. And Guy Spear, the education of value investor, his thank you notes led him to Warren Buffett. All those people that I just said have influenced my life, this challenge. If you're going to ask me for one person, I'm going to give it. It has to be Barbara.
Okay.
Because she raised me the longest. And had we not gotten into an argument, which was my fault when I was 18, I likely wouldn't have moved out to start all this. So that's I got to give her credit. And yet the person I don't know.
Well, you don't have to know. You don't have to know them. But would it be like an Ed Milet or Grant Cardone?
When recently Brian and I went to go see Jordan Peterson. And when I asked him at the end, in the VIP, you pay more, you get more, right? So I said, can I give you a hug? He's like, sure. So that was a nice moment for me because Jordan's work outside of everything that he's articulated, I'm not 100% in alignment with, but his work, his body of work has been highly influential in our firm because I went out and studied those that he studied, and I hold him at a high regard from the from a psychological standpoint, from a therapeutic standpoint. And so he's living, those that haven't lived will be like, I have about 200 influences on that end, from those that are like philosophers and psychologists and historians and scientists and imperialists, like Alexander the Great would be a warrior, Genghis Khan, Lao Tzu, Friedrich Nietzsche, philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer, Karl Popper, philosopher, Kierkegaard, theologian, Will Durant, historian, and the list goes on. I mean, modern day. That would be people that I don't physically, but even like at Ed, I've read his books, and almost everybody that's active in the space. I'll give another. I mean, Alan Weiss, who's been an influence in my life. I can't not say him. He's been a physical, proximal mentor and role model and consultant who has helped me realize, even with more clarity, that what it is that I've been able to provide and that we have been able to provide and that our firm has been able to provide. And it's an I, a we, and an our, because I have chosen the culture. We, myself and Jenna, our relationship, and now we work, and our firm, we have people that work for and with us. He's helped me realize just how special it is, what it is that we do. And so those are just a handful. I can go on and on and on about how every single family member that I am aware of, how I think I've taken certain things from all of them. And even my enemies.
That's a very observant statement, right? By the way, mine was Popeye. I always wanted to be Popeye. Popeye.
I like that.
Popeye was my hero, and
That's cool.
I put those on my dating profiles.
Popeye was a badass.
Popeye was a badass, right? And now I have Popeye on. That's what it's called, Popeye muscle, because of my torn bicep. So,
oh yeah.
Are we out of time? We have.
I got 5 minutes. And
Okay.
If you're willing, you're a great interviewer.
No, I'm not.
I'm about to just hand the show over to you.
No.
I'm going on vacation. You got 17 podcasts lined up. They're in.
Yeah, you're too young to remember this, but when I was a kid, Johnny Carson had the Tonight Show. Johnny Carson would go on vacation. They'd always have somebody else fill in, and I feel like I'm filling in for Johnny Carson right here.
Well, right? I appreciate that.
But nobody really wanted the guests. They always wanted Johnny Carson. So you're Johnny Carson, right? I'm just kind of filling in for it. But fortunately, I get to interview.
This has been really a joy.
Well, I think it's a joy for your listeners, and I would like to just tell you a little bit about where I'd like to go in part 2, and then we can schedule part 2. I still have some more questions about you. Okay. In part 2, I'd like to get into culture matters as an organization, and what impact your organization makes on other organizations. And if you, so I'm tipping you off, this is going to be, if you think the cultures of an organization have changed since COVID, and if so, how? And then how you deal with that. And I'm gonna close with one last question. Are you ready for the question?
Yep. I wrote this down.
Okay, here's the question. When you're gone, what do you want people to say about you?
I wrote it to them, so I hope they read it.
What I mean, people say, boy, Jay Doran, what do they say?
I've actually
what's your legacy?
I believe everyone's going to read the letters that I send them, all 150,000, and it'll be the longest funeral since the beginning of time.
I'm going to kick off before you, so I won't be there. But that's besides the point. So,
Hey, we don't know modern science. I'm
no,
challenging.
I'm telling you, man. I just barely got through the beginning of this year.
The
So,
good die young, Tony. Now I'm arguing for my demise. No, jokes aside, although I'm not really joking, I think that.
but if you could condense the answer to like, what's the legacy? Is it kindness? Is it education? What is
I'm
it?
much more interested in how I'd like to set everything right. And I have a lot to set right. And I'm trying to set it right.
Personally?
Yes, personally. Personally, I'd like to set it right. I'd like to and to come, because as I climb the dominance hierarchy, right, in the pursuit of power, influence, authority, fame, money, which I have interest in all of them, I believe I'm going to hurt more people without trying to. There's things I'm going to say that are going to hurt people without malintent. There's things I'm going to do that's going to hurt people. And so I'm going to spend my life trying to reconcile with that and embrace the symptoms of my purity, like the purity of heart.
I am
pursuit. So how I live is important. Like,
well, it's a fascinating answer, and somewhere in my notes, and I will go back and find it for our next session. And then I'll just say this. Kevin Elko called me one day recently, and it's somewhere in this notebook. I won't look for it. And he said to me, he's like, it was just a random call. And he said to me to this point, he's like, I was in Michigan yesterday. And I was talking to a guy, he's an undertaker, runs a funeral home. I said, okay. He said something to me that is stuck in my head, so I'll pass it on to you. And I said, what is it? And I wrote down the way he said it, but I'll just paraphrase it. It was, resolve your existing differences today as soon as possible. Just resolve your differences, whatever they are. And he said, and the reason the guy said that is because he owned a funeral home, and he said, every day, family members would come in and they'd be crying, saying, oh, we got in a fight last night. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to say I'm sorry. He said, this guy was telling these stories. He said, and he said, it was so impactful. And so the guy said to Kevin, resolve your differences. The only thing he says, resolve your differences, because these people will be in pain the rest of their lives. And so I thought it was interesting you said that. I mean, right. And I have it the way he said it written down, but I just wanted to throw that in there because it was one of the pieces of advice he gave me.
all the things that I want in life are in contention with who I want to be, because there's adversity. So how I live, how I serve, how I go about attaining success, which I think is an admixture of influence, power, responsibility, conflict. I'd like to make the past right and be a quality present and burden the future me, which I think is, I don't know who I'm going to be then, because I'm not them yet. So I think about that a lot, but I'm not afraid, meaning I'm less interested in how I remember than how I live, because frankly, I'm excited for the next level. I'm not preaching a theology here. I just don't feel as in how I'm remembered here, outside of if it's like a signifier that I'm living in a terrible way today in my life. How I remember here, I think I'll care even less. I think it's tied to how virtuous I live. I'm excited about what's next. This is kind of like a life I'm talking about now, a bit philosophically. It's kind of like a passing phase, like a breath. And I can feel that I've always felt it. So, but the things I'm interested in, I don't think they have much meaning outside of the interest that I place in them, but I place it in them. So I'm doing it the best I can without hurting as many people as I can. And the more I thought about this, the more I realized how easy it is to maybe say something that hurts people or do something unintentionally that hurts people, and so on. So how I want to be remembered is, it's less how I want to remember them, how I'd like to live that would increase the meaning that I could have in this life, that would, as a symptom of that, that's not really my business outside of how I live, would influence how I'm remembered. So if I'm never remembered 1,000 years from now, I'm actually totally okay with that. I mean, I kind of don't think that's not really my motivation. My motivation has always been inside of me to say something. It's almost like my whole life is to say this one thing. It's like, I think about this, I've thought of this forever. It's like my whole life's purpose was maybe to say that one thing to that one person that then didn't kill half the planet. Or my kid will do something that stops the next Holocaust. So when you think of it like that, I just think I need to, pursue these false idols as kindly, as gently, as compassionately.
Well, this is gonna be my last statement, but I need to make it. For the Culture Matters listeners who have never met you personally, Jay Doran is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And I mean that sincerely. It's not because he's my friend, it's because he is. He's very grateful for the people around him. He's grateful for everything in his life. You can just tell when you talk to him. So when he says, people may get upset with him, I can't imagine, but he is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And on that note, I'm looking forward to part 2.